Minister, the wage subsidy scheme is, in principle, a good scheme that tries to ensure that people who lost jobs and income as a result of the COVID-19 measures would have a road back to employment, maintain their relationship with their employment, and have some sort of income support to sustain them through the very difficult period of the lockdown, when people together, collectively, on the principle of we are all in it together, endured very significant hardship to try and protect our society from COVID-19. Now, I want to put it to you that while it is correct to look to extend that scheme in order to protect people, that your failure to provide support for particular sectors hardest hit by the measures taken to protect us from COVID-19 are destroying the solidarity that existed and threaten to undermine the principle of we're all in it together, which is a very dangerous thing, I put it to you, to do when it is very, very likely there's going to be a second wave and further spikes. If there is, and once again we have to call on people to come together, to sacrifice for the common good, you will have done extreme damage to the goodwill of many people if you leave them hung out to dry in the current situation, where you have started to dismantle the PUP support payment but put nothing in its place for particular groups. Now, you can probably guess which groups I'm talking about, because I have raised them repeatedly for weeks now. In the case of two of these sectors, I fought very hard to get them in front of the COVID committee, where they presented their case. But it appears the government is just not listening, and I do not understand it. And those groups are the people in arts, music, live entertainment and the events sector, and taxi drivers, both of whom have no roadmap to full recovery of their incomes, but who have been savaged now with the cuts to the PUP. I mean, yesterday alone, this morning, I had 10 emails from taxi drivers who've had their PUP payments cut. I am inundated, as I suspect a lot of TDs are, by musicians and others in the arts sector who've had their payments cut, and indeed I've met with those groups, as I said, got them into the COVID committee where they explained their plight, and they begged, they appealed, they urged the government to provide them with an income subsidy until the sectors in which they are employed fully recovered, and the government has ignored them. And I appeal to you, even at this late stage, to reconsider that and to provide specific supports for them. They are very reasonable requests, Minister, and you could have done it in this bill. And that's the point. And I tried to submit amendments. I mean, the opposition bent over backwards, waiving pre-legislative scrutiny, allowing guillotines, allowing all these bills to be put through. But some of the amendments I put in on this today were refused because they were too late. This is even before its second stage, which is unfair. Now, that's not your fault. But I am appealing to you, even at this late stage. If employers can get a wage subsidy, why can't a taxi driver, who are their own employers? Why can't they get an income subsidy when their business has collapsed by about 80%? Much more than the required percentage to benefit from the wage subsidy that employers are getting. Their income has collapsed by about 80%. Ask any taxi driver at the moment who's going out there looking for work. They are getting a fraction of the work. Why? Because the work they previously got was very strongly linked to the sectors most hard hit. Tourism, music, live entertainment, theatres, Bars that are now closed, that was a huge amount of their work. That work is gone, and therefore they are really struggling. And they asked for a few things, some of which didn't even require money. The taxi drivers asked for a step-down income subsidy, which you could have put in this bill. They asked for a moratorium on the further issuing of licences to taxis when we have more taxis in this city than they have in New York City. They asked for the 10-year rule where you have to replace your car to be waived to 15 years because of all the income that they have lost. And they asked to benefit from the restart schemes, which they are being excluded from. They still have their fixed costs, insurance, paying taxi companies, all those sort of fixed costs, which were estimated in one report recently to be about €11,000 a year, and they are being denied even the €1,000 grant from social protection, never mind the 4,000 grant that has been given to other businesses. How is that fair? So I'm asking you, Minister, to provide some support for these workers. And I should point out that your failure to do so in the case of a particular cohort of taxi drivers is actually endangering lives and public health. Because the older taxi drivers who were over 66 didn't get the pandemic payment, therefore because of that continued to work during the pandemic, endangering their own health when they should be cocooned, and many of them decided to stop work but are now being whipped back out to work when they don't actually feel safe to do so. That is unfair and endangering the public health effort and their specific health. So I appeal to you, Minister, please engage with these workers and provide them with some supports until their sector recovers. A sector that has been decimated through no fault of their own. In the same way, the musicians, the artists, the crew, and so on in that sector, they need some support. They're not benefiting from the grants in many cases, and they've had their income supports cut via the PUP cuts. You know, somebody who plays music in bars, or somebody who does weddings, bands that do weddings, okay? There's restrictions on the number of people who can go to weddings. There's less people likely to get married even in the current situation. There's less work. There might be a bit work available for them. They might get the odd gig, but it's nothing like it was previously. So what they need is an income subsidy, which is a floor below which they won't go, but where they can earn a bit on top of it. And that is the same principle you're applying to employers. Why can you not apply it to these sectors that have been particularly hard hit? And I particularly want to say that you should do that because this contrasts with the way you're treating employers. Money is being thrown at employers very liberally. I mean, I assume the reason you won't give it to arts workers and to taxi drivers is because you're afraid, oh, they'll scam the system. I mean, the Taoiseach, when I asked earlier, why aren't you doing this? He said, oh, it's a bit hard to administrate. Now, that's code, right, for we're afraid we'll be scammed. And this, of course, is the impulse that also led to the cuts in the PUP, the travel advice, debacle, and so on is, oh, basically, lower income workers, the less well off, they're going to scam the system. I think that is the bias that's operating, whereas we'll throw billions at big business and we're not too worried if they might be scamming us. And many of them are actually profitable. There's no provisions in this bill, for example, to ensure that big business that is making significant profits are not ripping off and taking advantage of the subsidy scheme. No scrutiny there, they're not excluded, but others are excluded. It's not fair, Minister. And I'm appealing to you to be fair. One, because fairness is important in and of itself, but two, because we're all in it together and the social solidarity we need now in the face of COVID-19 for the foreseeable future will be absolutely wrecked if you do this. And there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of despair in the case of many of these workers. Finally, I would just say this, in terms of those who are being given the subsidy, the employers and so on, none of those employers should get this subsidy unless they recognise trade unions. If they're guilty of of collective redundancies, unilateral pay cuts, taking advantage of this wage subsidy, they should not get it. And there should be conditions attached to big business and profitable business who are benefiting this subsidy to ensure the subsidy guarantees the rights of workers.